Welcome, dreamers, to another journey through time's hidden corridors. I am your guide through the dreaming historian, where ancient mysteries whisper their secrets to those who dare to listen. Tonight, we venture into the forgotten empire of Aksum, a realm of towering obelisks, sacred trade routes, and lost wisdom nestled in the highlands of ancient Ethiopia. This is a tale cloaked in the gold dust of vanished time, where echoes of a hidden superpower linger beneath the soil and stone. Before we embark on this mystical journey, if these whispers from the past resonate with your soul, let your presence be known through a gentle light, and join our circle of dreamers by subscribing for more nightly journeys into history's hidden realms. Share with us, fellow dreamers, from which corner of the world you are joining tonight's contemplation. Let our global community of mystery seekers connect across time zones as we drift together into the past. Now, settle into comfort, close your eyes, and let the ancient voices guide you into peaceful contemplation. Beneath the shimmering curtain of twilight that drapes the highlands of modern-day Ethiopia, there lies a silence, ancient and knowing. The wind glides over worn stones and rustles through groves of frankincense trees, whispering secrets to the soil. It is a place where time does not move in straight lines, but coils gently like incense, smoke rising into a sky dusted with stars. Here, in this timeless cradle of mist and memory, once thrived a mighty empire, before the pyramids of Meru fell into stillness, and long before the towers of Europe reached upward. Aksum carved its legacy into the mountainside. The people who walked these lands raised obelisks like frozen sunbeams, pointing toward the heavens as if in quiet dialogue with eternity. This was not a realm of noise and spectacle. Aksum was a kingdom of precision, devotion, and mystery, an empire whose power did not shout but hummed beneath the rhythm of trade winds and sacred rites. Its stone monuments speak with solemn dignity, their surfaces etched not with boastful kings but with symbols hinting at cosmic alignments, royal funerals, and forgotten gods. Let us now return to those early whispers, to the cradle of the empire, and begin where all great stories do. At the root of the earth and the heart of the people, Aksum was born not in deserts or dense jungles, but in the undulating plateaus of the northern horn of Africa. This land, blessed with both arable valleys and commanding hills, became a crossroads of worlds. Its people were cultivators of grain and keepers of cattle, but also philosophers of the stars and stewards of the ancient trade routes, stretched like invisible rivers from India to Rome. The soil beneath their feet hid gold and iron, the trees wept myrrh and incense, the mountains gathered water into sacred springs. Nature herself seemed to bless Aksum, and the people returned that blessing in stone, ritual, and song. From the earliest centuries of the first millennium, Aksum began to rise, not like a fire, but like a slow and sacred breath. Its kings did not first build armies. They built harmony with the land and the heavens. They mapped constellations. They aligned tombs with and they listened to the messages in bird flight, in shadow, in the murmuring of mountain winds. The first great symbols of Aksum's rise were not fortresses, but stelae, the mighty obelisks that still stand today in quiet defiance of time, carved from single pieces of stone, some reaching over 20 meters in height. These monuments marked the resting places of kings whose names have faded, but whose memory lingers in vertical shadow. To walk among them is to walk through time's reflection. Each pillar a whisper, each base a heartbeat. But why such tall, slender, celestial structures in a world of sun and soil? Perhaps it was to draw the heavens downward, to anchor the divine in stone, or perhaps to send the souls of kings upward, to offer them as beams of light returned to the sky. In this mystery lies the essence of Aksum, a kingdom always reaching, always connecting the visible with the unseen. Beyond their stone poetry, the Aksumites were artisans of intricate metal. Gold jewelry glimmered with tiny lions, moons, and floral patterns. Their coins, among the first in Africa, bore the faces of monarchs, but also crosses and suns, symbols that merged royal power with spiritual resonance. Each coin was more than currency. It was a talisman, a prayer, a declaration that here, in Aksum, gold bore meaning beyond wealth. By the 3rd century, Aksum was not merely a kingdom. It had become an empire, trading ivory, spices, and gemstones through the Red Sea and into the hands of emperors and merchants across 3 continents. Roman historians wrote of them. Indian merchants sought them. Byzantine emperors respected them. And yet, within their own walls, the Aksumites remained humble, quiet stewards of a deep and ancient way. Their capital, also called Aksum, was not a marble-clad citadel. It was a sacred constellation of temples, palaces, stelae fields, and underground tombs. There were streets paved in volcanic stone, sanctuaries guarded by lions carved in relief, and wells believed to open into the underworld. Every inch of space felt touched by ritual, not ostentation. Night fell gently here. The stars over Aksum were not distant, but intimate. As if watching, remembering, the people gathered by oil lamps, the priests read signs in firelight, children fell asleep to the soft cadence of elders retelling the origins of their world. a world where a boy king named Mentelik had once brought the Ark of the Covenant to these hills, where angels and ancestors walked unseen, and where dreams held the power to shape stone. And though their empire expanded with ships and treaties, their heart remained fixed to something older, something not written in conquest but in contemplation. They did not build amphitheaters or colosseums. They built memory into the land itself. The hills, the rivers, the standing stones, all became repositories of meaning. The land was the archive. The soul of the people was the ink. As centuries passed, and kings came and went, Aksum endured, not by sword but by sanctity. Its strength lay in silence. Its power lay in presence. And perhaps that is why it was forgotten by many. For in a world obsessed with noise, the quiet ones are so often overlooked. Yet they endure, like stars, like mountains, like echoes. Now, dear dreamer, we prepare to walk deeper into this ancient world, into the hidden chambers and whispered legacies that await beneath Aksum's timeless stones. Let the winds of the highlands carry you now into the next realm of this journey, where the Ark of the Covenant, legends of Solomon, and a priesthood of eternal fire await. For the empire of Aksum is only beginning to reveal its ancient soul. In the ancient heart of Aksum, beneath a canopy of starlight that seemed almost close enough to touch, there lies a church draped in shadow and guarded in silence. Its stone walls are simple, unassuming, yet within them sleeps a legend as old as time itself. The Ark of the Covenant, not the idea of it, nor a replica, but the true, sacred vessel that once held the divine presence between golden cherubim wings. Or so the keepers of the mountain say. The Church of St. Mary of Zion stands like a sentinel at the crossroads of memory and faith, and behind it, in a modest chapel wrapped in centuries of mystery, the Ark is believed to rest. No eyes may gaze upon it, no hands may touch it. Only one guardian, a chosen monk who dedicates his life to its protection, may dwell in its company. He does not leave, he does not speak of what he sees. He is both priest and prisoner, the final veil between the sacred and the profane. But how did such a legendary relic, once cradled in the innermost sanctum of some temple, find its way to a mountain kingdom in the Horn of Africa? The story begins in shadows, in the fertile lands of lore where history and myth, according to the ancient Ethiopian text known as the Kibra-Nagast, the glory of the kings, the Queen of Sheba journeyed from these lands to Jerusalem, seeking wisdom. Her name was Makada, sovereign of Saba, ruler of incense roots and golden hills. In Jerusalem, she found not only wisdom but Solomon himself, the king whose gaze pierced hearts and whose words shaped empires. From their union, a son was born, Menelik, child of two worlds. Raised among the whispers of Aksum's highlands, he would one day return to his father's court in Jerusalem. But Solomon, fearing that his son might one day be used as a political pawn, sent Mentelik home, not empty-handed but blessed with knowledge, treasure, and perhaps something more. It is said that a company of Levites, loyal to Mentelik, conspired to take the ark from the temple and bring it to Ethiopia. Some say it was done with Solomon's blessing, others say it was an act of fate. But what is agreed upon, by tradition, by liturgy, and by the echoing belief of millions, is that the ark came to Aksum, and it never left. There is a mystical symmetry to the tale, as if the ark sought refuge, not just relocation. From the grandeur of Jerusalem to the stillness of Aksum, it found not a kingdom of spectacle, but of reverence, not walls of marble, but hearts of stone carved by faith. Here, far from the eyes of kings and conquerors, the ark entered a long, secret sleep. Over time, the presence of the ark infused Aksumite culture with sacred weight. Processions were held in its honor. Churches were built in its shadow. And even today, when the festival of Timkat is held, priests carry a replica of the ark, the tabot wrapped in embroidered cloth, through the streets, accompanied by chant and incense. It is not spectacle. It is memory-made movement. And always, behind the ritual, lies the quiet suggestion that the true ark is near, resting in the chapel behind St. Mary's, shrouded in prayer. Yet the modern mind hungers for proof. Scholars search for relics, measurements, radiocarbon dates. But Aksum does not yield to such inquiry. It speaks in silence. The chapel is guarded. The priest does not speak. And so, the ark remains both presence and mystery, known to the soul but hidden from the eye. There have been glimpses, strange and sacred accounts from ages past. In the 20th century, a handful of explorers were allowed to view the exterior of the chapel, to hear the guardians speak through the narrow slats of a stone window. Some say they felt a presence, an energy unlike anything else, like standing near lightning or beneath a cathedral bell before it rings. Others report stories of divine protection, of invaders falling ill before reaching the chapel, of strange lights seen above the hill on sacred nights, of dreams visited by saints warning those who come too close. Is it truth? Is it legend? In Aksum, the question itself dissolves, because here, mystery is not something to be solved, it is something to be held. And whether the ark rests beneath the chapel's ancient stones or in the hearts of those who believe, its power remains, not as a weapon, not as a tool, but as a symbol of a sacred trust, a covenant between past and present, heaven and earth. The Ark is not just a relic, it is a silence that speaks, a stillness that holds thunder. And so, as the monk stands, his eternal vigil in that sacred chapel, he holds not just a box of gold and wood, but the faith of a civilization. He is the bridge between legends that sleep and dreams that still breathe. As the stars rise again over the highlands, we leave the sanctuary behind, not with answers, but with echoes. We descend the mountain not with certainty but with wonder. And ahead, another path opens. This one leading to the underground tombs and royal crypts where Aksumite kings slumber, sealed in stone and guarded by symbols that speak a language lost to time. Dreamer, let the mist gather once more around you, and follow the whispers into the earth itself, beneath the gentle slopes of Aksum's sacred hills, where birds call to the twilight and incense trees bow in reverence to the wind. There lies a world carved in darkness, a hidden necropolis, eternal and unseen. It is a world of tombs, of silence sealed in stone, where the great kings of Aksum rest not in monuments alone, but in the womb of the earth itself. These are no ordinary graves. The royal tombs of Aksum are deep, deliberate, and ancient, vast underground chambers hewn from bedrock, sealed with slabs the size of doors to the underworld. They do not announce themselves on the surface. Instead, they wait, quiet and still, hidden beneath the very foundations of civilization. Time forgot them. The earth protected them. Archaeologists have uncovered only a handful, and even those reveal just a fraction of what lies buried beneath the shadow of the obelisk. For every tomb unearthed, many more remain entombed by centuries of stone and legend. To descend into one is to enter a chamber of breathless reverence. Stone walls stretched long into the dark, lined with precision, their joints so tight one might believe they were born of the mountain. Inside, corridors branch into antechambers, niches, and sarcophagi carved not with boastful inscriptions, but with subtle motifs: solar discs, lotus flowers, the curve of a horned god, now silent, yet eternal. One such tomb, believed to belong to a great ruler known only by his royal title, bore treasures untouched by daylight for more than a millennium. Gold amulets, delicately wrought crosses, and incense burners still scented faintly of myrrh. Coins bearing the face of Azana, the king who first embraced Christianity in the 4th century, lay beside shattered urns and faded prayer cloths. These were not offerings to death, but to transformation, gifts for the journey beyond the veil. In the Aksumite mind, death was not an end but a return, a passage from the visible world into the whispering realm of ancestors. Each tomb echoed with this belief. Even in their silence, they seemed to sing. It is said that some tombs were aligned with the stars, positioned so that at certain nights of the year, moonlight would reach through narrow shafts, touching the resting places of kings with silver light. If true, it reveals a consciousness not only of death, but of the cosmos, a belief that the departed kings did not vanish but became part of the great celestial order. The tombs were not hidden out of fear, but out of sacredness. Their inaccessibility was an act of protection. Aksumites believed that disturbing the dead could unbalance the harmony between realms. To open a tomb without permission was to invite the silence to speak in sorrow. Some say the mountain itself hums at night, and that if you listen from certain stones, you can hear the breath of the kings still echoing in the chambers below. Others speak of dreams, visions of cloaked figures standing in long corridors, offering silent blessings or solemn warnings. The tombs are not simply relics. They are memories petrified, prayers preserved in stone, and they tell us something else, something profound. Though Aksum once rivaled Rome in prestige, its people did not glorify death through spectacle. They did not build massive pyramids visible for miles, nor did they embalm their rulers in endless gold. Instead, they chose depth, stillness, mystery, a sacred withdrawal from the world's gaze, as if the soul's journey required silence more than ceremony. To walk the tomb corridors is to enter a sacred story not written in language but in space. Every curve, every step downward, is a meditation, a reminder that beneath all greatness lies the quiet truth of mortality, not as defeat, but as transformation. In some of the tombs, inscriptions were left in Ge'ez, the ancient liturgical language of Ethiopia, not proclamations of power, but prayers for the soul, invocations of light, words meant not for the living, but for the journey beyond. And yet, despite the majesty of these structures, many still sleep beneath the earth, undisturbed. The hills surrounding Aksum are dotted with mounds and subtle depressions, each perhaps the doorway to another world below. But the local people, keepers of oral tradition and spiritual wisdom, warn against careless excavation. The tombs, they say, are watched, not just by memory, not just by stone, but by forces unseen, guardians of sacred balance. Perhaps that is why many explorers have turned back, why even in modern times, with technology and tools, so little has been disturbed. Aksum does not yield its secrets, it waits for those who approach with reverence. and so we, too, do not pry. We listen. As the wind returns over the hills, we rise gently from the tombs, our hearts heavier with mystery, yet lighter with understanding. The kings may sleep, but their dreams rise like mist, curling through the corridors of time. Now, as we step once more into the star-washed surface of ancient Aksum, we turn our gaze toward the skies that shaped this civilization. For beyond the tombs, beyond the trade, beyond the stone, lies a kingdom of the stars, an Aksumite cosmology written in starlight and shadow. Come, dreamer, the heavens await. The night sky above Aksum was not merely a backdrop to life, it was the soul of it. Before books bore history and before scrolls held scripture, the stars told the stories of the people, and in the highlands of ancient Aksum, where the air thinned and the heavens seemed almost a whisper, the sky was a scroll read in silence and wonder. Its constellations were not abstractions, but ancestors, its movements not random but rhythmic, a language spoken by the divine to those who dared to listen. Aksumite astronomers were not cloaked in robes of pomp, but in simplicity and stillness. They watched the stars from mountaintop sanctuaries and sacred enclaves, aligning their rituals to the patterns of light and shadow that danced across the sky. To them, time was not linear but cyclical, a weaving of seasons, lunar phases, and celestial events that guided both agriculture and prophecy. One of the most enduring mysteries surrounding Aksumite architecture is the alignment of their monumental obelisks, those soaring stelae that pierced the sky like frozen beams of sunlight. Some scholars suggest these obelisks were positioned to mirror key stars or to mark solstices, forming an ancient calendar of stone. Each shadow cast, each angle drawn, was part of a cosmic conversation, if true. Long before maps bore borders and names, before merchants inscribed their ledgers in ink, there were roads that stretched across continents, roads of dust and devotion, shadow and sun, and at the center of these roads, where gold gleamed and myrrh wept from sacred trees, stood Aksum, quiet, poised, and eternal. The empire was not built on conquest alone. It was built on exchange, of goods, of ideas, of spirit. Aksum was both a destination and a departure point, a resting place for caravans and a harbor for ships that sailed the breadth of the Red Sea, from the mountains to the coast, from the incense groves of the southern highlands to the harbors of Agilis. Aksum thrived not in isolation, but in communion with the world. The port city of Agilis, now a silent ruin near the modern shores of Eritrea, was once a hum of multilingual voices. Arab traders, Egyptian scribes, Greek navigators, Indian jewelers, all found their way to Agilis drawn by the aroma of frankincense, the gleam of ivory, and the promise of gold. Here, the goods of 3 continents exchanged hands beneath a sky salted with sea wind and cloudless blue. From India came cinnamon and silk, from Arabia came pearls and carved alabaster, from Rome came wine glass and silver coins bearing the profile of emperor, and from the hills of Aksum descended long caravans, bearing offerings shaped by earth and time, gold, iron, ivory, tortoiseshell, and above all, incense. Frankincense and myrrh were more than perfume. They were sacred, burned in temples, offered to the divine, used in rites of passage and death. Their smoke connected the living to the unseen. The resin was harvested by cutting deep into the bark of trees that grew only in certain sacred groves. The wounds bled white sap, which hardened into golden tears. These tears, carried in clay jars and wrapped in linen, made their way across deserts, seas, and empires. In return, Aksum grew rich, not in greed, but in meaning. The empire minted its own coins, a rarity in sub-Saharan Africa at the time. They were small, circular, and often bore crosses or stars, lions or royal profiles, made of gold, silver, and bronze. These coins told stories of kings named Azana Caleb and Armav, conversions to Christianity, of power balanced with piety. But they were more than just tokens of wealth. They were passports, evidence of Aksum's reach. Coins bearing Aksumite kings have been found in India, in Egypt, and even in far-flung parts of Europe, whispering of a forgotten presence, a gentle empire whose influence extended not by sword, but by silent exchange. Yet not all roads were of stone and sea. Some were carved through song, through memory, through ritual. Camel caravans would leave the highlands in slow, deliberate rhythm. Each step rang with the sound of bells. Each stop at a well was a liturgy of patience. The traders sang songs to the animals, to the spirits of the land, to the ancestors who watched over their journey. Along the way, shrines were erected from stacked stones, offerings to unseen guardians. These were not merely economic ventures, they were spiritual pilgrimages. To walk these roads was to enter the story of the world, to carry with you the soul of Aksum into the breath of other lands. And in return, ideas flowed back. Through these trade routes came tales of distant gods, philosophies from the East, medical knowledge from Alexandria, and sacred scrolls written in languages both foreign and familiar. Monks returned from Jerusalem bearing new scriptures. Artisans brought techniques from India. Navigators shared star maps inked in memory. Aksum was not just a receiver, but a transformer. In this quiet melting of worlds, the empire became more than a merchant's kingdom. It became a spiritual crossroad, a place where the sacred merged with the material, where incense carried not just fragrance but revelation. And yet amidst this worldly wealth, the heart of Aksum remained grounded. Its kings issued decrees of charity. Churches were built in stone and humility. The people did not forget that all wealth is fleeting, but wisdom endures. Even today, the ancient trade roads can still be traced by the ruins left behind. Abandoned stone lodges where travelers once rested, wells carved into granite that still catch rain, and forgotten altars stained by centuries of offerings. They whisper of an age where silence traveled faster than sound, where a jar of myrrh could open a door, and a coin could carry prayer. As we follow the last trail of sandalwood into the fading twilight, let us now turn toward the sacred center of the empire's soul. Not a temple or a palace, but a manuscript. A book that carries within its pages the entire cosmology of a people. A book known as the Kebra, the glory of the kings. Let us now open its pages and drift deeper into Aksum's spiritual heart. There are books that inform, and then there are books that breathe. In the highlands of Ethiopia, beneath the shadow of ancient mountains and among the stone churches carved from living rock, one such book lives still, not bound merely in parchment and thread but in faith, memory, and mystery. It is called the Kebra, the glory of the kings, and it is the soul script of an empire, the whispered genealogy of a people who saw themselves as born of both earth and heaven. To open the Kebra is not to read, but to listen. Each line hums like a chant carried through generations, and each chapter is a mirror reflecting 1,000 years of spiritual yearning and royal pride. This sacred text, written in the ancient GS script, is no mere chronicle of events. It is a tapestry of myth, prophecy, divine romance, and imperial destiny. Within its pages, Ethiopia is no longer a land at the edge of maps. It becomes the center of a sacred drama, an axis between Jerusalem and heaven, between Solomon and Sheba, between Ark and altar, and at its heart stands a boy Mentelik, born of two worlds, the living link between the Solomonic line and the Aksumite throne. According to the Kebra Nagas, the Queen of Sheba, known in Ethiopian lore as Makeda, journeyed across deserts and mountains to seek the wisdom of King Solomon. In his court, she encountered not only intellect, but spiritual gravity. Their meeting was not one of conquests or courtly seduction, but of shared reverence for the divine, a sacred convergence of north and south, of spirit and form. Their union produced a child Mentelik, who was raised in Ethiopia and, upon coming of age, traveled to Jerusalem to meet his father. But the tale takes a mystical turn. As Mentelik prepared to return home, it is said that the Ark of the Covenant, or its spirit, chose to go with him. Unbeknownst to Solomon, the Ark was carried away by the priests of Zion, who believed Ethiopia to be its rightful resting place. When Solomon discovered its absence, he wept, not in rage, but in awe, for he saw that it was the will of the divine. And so, the Ark, the sacred vessel that once thundered with the voice of God on Mount Sinai, found its final dwelling place not in the land of its birth, but in the mountains of Aksum, guarded by generations, veiled in secrecy, and honored through the liturgy of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. Through this mythic lineage, the emperors of Aksum and later Ethiopia claimed descent from Solomon himself. Their crowns were not merely symbols of power, but of covenant. Their rule, an echo of divine will. But the Kebra Nagas is more than a royal myth. It is also a meditation on obedience, on exile and return, on divine presence hidden within humble vessels. It speaks of Ethiopia as a chosen land, not chosen by conquest, but by divine favor, a land where the divine sought refuge when the world grew too loud. Some passages whisper of angels who fly only at night, who protect the mountain where the ark rests. Others speak of cities that rise only in dreams, of books hidden beneath lakes, and of scrolls written in the tongues of birds. The book is not consistent in tone. It weaves history with prophecy, parable with commandment, but in this very weave lies its power. It mirrors the way memory lives in the soul, not in order, but in resonance. The Kebra Nagas was not written to convince outsiders. It was written to anchor the spirit of a people, to remind them that they were not forgotten, not marginal, not lost, that within them flowed a river of sacred lineage, a light unbroken by empire or exile. And even as the Aksumite Empire declined, the words of the Kebra Nagas remained, passed down by monks who slept in caves lit by oil lamps, by scribes who inked its letters with patience and reverence, by singers who chanted its stories under stars. To this day, the Kebra Nagas is read aloud in ceremonies, not just as scripture, but as invocation. Each reading is a reminder that the past is not gone. It is simply waiting to be remembered. Its stories have shaped Ethiopian identity for over 1,000 years, and in its echoes, we hear more than Aksumite pride. We hear a quiet defiance against erasure, a voice that says, "We remember." Now, dreamer, as we close the sacred book and feel its echo settle into silence, let us turn our gaze to what followed, the conversion of a mighty empire to Christianity, and the mystical transformation that would unfold in the reign of a king called Azana. Let us walk now toward the sacred threshold where empire met revelation. In the vast corridors of history, there are moments when the soul of a nation shifts, not with war, not with fire, but with light. One such moment unfolded in the highlands of Aksum during the reign of a young king whose name would echo through centuries, Azana, but a witness to mystery, a monarch whose heart was turned not by sword or scroll, but by spirit. The conversion of Aksum to Christianity did not arrive in thunder. It arrived in the silence between stories, in the breath of prophecy, in the footsteps of a stranger named Frumentius was not born in Aksum. He came from the distant shores of Tyre, in the Phoenician lands, and arrived upon Ethiopian soil through shipwreck, a misfortune that, in time, would seed a spiritual revolution. He and his brother Odysseus were taken to the royal court of Aksum after their vessel was attacked in the Red Sea. Instead of death, they found sanctuary. Instead of exile, they found purpose. Frumentius, learned and gentle, gained favor at the court, particularly as a tutor and companion to the young Prince Azana, and as he taught letters and numbers, he also whispered of a different world, a world of one divine presence, not many, of a carpenter's son who healed with words, of a light that never extinguished. Azana listened, and in time, as he ascended the throne, he did more than remember Frumentius's teachings. He allowed them to transform the soul of the empire. He sent emissaries to Alexandria, where the Christian patriarch ordained Frumentius, as the first bishop of Aksum, but as Abba Salama, the Father of Peace, carrying with him not just the gospel, but a sacred mission. Under Azana's reign, churches were erected beside ancient temples, crosses were carved where once only solar discs had rested, and yet the transformation was not a destruction. The ancient soul of Aksum was not cast out, it was transfigured. Old and new began to weave. In place of obelisks, great stone thrones bore Christian symbols. The coinage of the realm, once adorned with spears and crescents, now bore crosses, not rigid Roman forms, but delicate, lattice-like Ethiopian designs, filled with light and space. The language of ritual shifted. Incense was burned no longer only to ancient gods, but to the memory of saints and martyrs. Yet this was no forced conversion. Azana did not demand belief, he lived it. In royal inscriptions, still preserved on stone tablets in Gias, Azana proclaims his victories and his devotion. But woven into these declarations are prayers, invocations, and appeals to righteousness. He speaks of God, not as a conqueror might, but as a child of destiny, one shaped by forces deeper than the throne. The Christianization of Aksum was unique in another way. It happened not as an echo of Roman influence, but alongside it. At a time when Constantine was embracing the faith in Byzantium, Azana was doing the same in Africa, not in mimicry, but in harmony. Across deserts and seas, the same light flickered in distant corners of the world. And Aksum did not become Rome. Its Christianity bore its own fragrance steeped in silence, carved into mountain churches, sung in tones that echoed the wind through cypress groves. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church that grew from Azana's choice remains to this day one of the oldest continuous Christian traditions in the world. But Azana's conversion was not merely a religious act, it was a metaphysical pivot. It marked Aksum's turning toward inward strength, spiritual sovereignty, and the enduring light of mystery. It reframed kingship itself, from dominion to divine stewardship. And so, as the king walked among his people, it was said he often paused at the rising of the sun, not to declare his power, but to offer prayer, that he listened to his dreamers, that he honored the bones of the past while planting the seeds of the future. His legacy lives not only in ruins and records, but in the rhythm of liturgies still sung by monks wrapped in white, standing barefoot on holy ground beneath the stars. Even today, pilgrims speak of dreams where Azana appears, not as a king, but as a guiding shadow, blessing those who remember. And so we too remember, as the bells of twilight sound from unseen towers in the land of dream, we leave the court of Azana behind, but not without reverence, not without gratitude. Now our path curves again, this time into the quiet revolution of stone churches carved downward, not built upward, a sacred architectural mystery awaiting in the misted valleys and rock-cut sanctuaries of Ethiopia's hidden dreamer. The descent into mystery continues. There are places on this earth where the line between sky and stone seems to vanish, where the sacred is not built, but revealed, as if the mountain itself had whispered its shape into being. In the highlands of Ethiopia, far from the bustling centers of empires long gone, there exist churches that were not raised toward heaven, but carved from it, sanctuaries sculpted downward into the living rock, pulled from the very bones of the earth. To enter these churches is to descend into shadow and silence. They do not rise in towers or domes. They descend in devotion. Hewn entirely from a single piece of basalt or tufa, these subterranean cathedrals remain among the most mysterious and awe-inspiring feats of sacred architecture in human history. Their most famous gathering place is Lalibela, a city now synonymous with these miraculous structures. But the tradition of carving churches from stone predates even and its spiritual roots lie in the legacy of Aksum, in the empire's love for sacred geometry, for silence, and for the divine resting gently within the material world. The people of Aksum understood something modern minds often forget, that the earth itself can be a prayer. The transition from obelisks to raccoon churches marks not a rupture, but a continuation, a deepening of faith, from monument to sanctuary, from symbol to shelter. According to legend, the idea to carve churches from stone was not born from human ambition, but from a dream. The story goes that King Lalibela, reigning centuries after the fall of Aksum's height, was shown a vision of the heavenly Jerusalem during the state of deep prayer. In this dream, he was commanded by angels to recreate the sacred city in stone, not in the material extravagance of the world, but in humility, quietness, and depth. And so began the carving. Each church was not constructed but revealed. By chiseling away what was not sacred to uncover what was, downward they cut, slowly, reverently, until chapels emerged, complete with archways, columns, windows, and altars, all part of the original mountain, untouched by the builder's ego, untouched by time. There are 13 major churches in Lalibela, connected by narrow trenches, subterranean tunnels, and symbolic paths that mirror the pilgrimage to Jerusalem itself. Each has a name, a mystery, and a voice. Bet Medhain Alem, the house of the Savior of the world, is the largest monolithic church in the world. It stands like a ship carved from silence, its tall pillars glowing in the slanted light of dawn. Bet Mariam, the house of Mary, is believed to be the oldest, a place where water springs up from beneath the altar, said to hold healing powers for those who believe. Bet Georges, the house of St. George, perhaps the most iconic, lies carved in the shape of a perfect cross, an island of symmetry sunken into stone, its walls golden with lichen and light. No nails, no timber, no scaffolding, just faith and patient labor, chisel upon chisel, until devotion itself took form. These churches were not made with blueprints but with prayer maps. Each measurement corresponded to sacred numbers. Each curve followed celestial influence. Their orientation, their dimensions, and even the play of light and shadow throughout the day speak of an architecture guided by more than hands. Worship in these spaces is unlike anything else on earth. The scent of frankincense lingers in the air like ancient breath. Psalms and ge'ez echo off the stone walls, the vibration sinking into skin and spirit. Priests, robed in white, stand in pools of light that feel more like revelations than illumination. And outside, the wind rustles across the plateau, carrying with it the same chants sung for over 800 years. Though the peak of Aksumite power had passed by the time these churches were carved, their spiritual DNA is unmistakable. The Aksumites had long revered stone, not just as material, but as medium. They believed in building toward silence, in shaping the divine from the permanent. And so, as Aksum's political dominance faded, its spiritual voice deepened, echoing into the subterranean world of Lalibela and beyond. Even today, new rock-hewn churches are still being discovered. Some hidden in valleys, others high in the cliffs, accessible only by rope ladders and pilgrims. Some contained faded murals of saints with wide, dark eyes. Others hold scrolls wrapped in animal hide, unread but not forgotten. To walk the stone paths between these churches is to enter a sacred geography, where time does not pass, but spirals, where the architecture itself teaches patience, and where even silence seems to kneel in reverence. As we emerge once more from the stone wombs of Lalibela, blinking into the golden light of the Ethiopian highlands, we carry with us more than knowledge. We carry stillness. Now, let us turn toward a quieter mystery still. The guardians of Aksum's memory, not kings, not monks, but the script, the ancient ge'ez language, and the scrolls it once filled. For the soul of an empire endures not only in stone, but in the rhythm of the written word. In a world where languages rise and fall like waves against the shore of time, some tongues do not vanish. They descend. They become sacred. They become whisper. Such is the story of ge'ez, the ancient language of Aksum, the script of saints, the ink of monks, the syllables that even now drift upward like incense in quiet monasteries carved from stone. To hear ge'ez sung in the pre-dawn dark, echoing within the hollow heart of a mountain church, is to feel time pause. Its vowels do not cut. They glide. Its consonants do not shout. They hum, and within its cadence lies the breath of a kingdom that has never truly died. Ge'ez was not only the language of government and scripture in Aksum, it was the soul's grammar, the thread that wove divine thought into earthly rhythm. Its script is unmistakable, elegant, flame-shaped, rhythmic, each character with a slow arc like the bow of a priest in prayer. Derived from ancient South Arabian roots, ge'ez evolved into its own form, not just in look, but in spirit. By the time of Aksum's golden age, it was not merely written, it was invoked. Inscriptions in ge'ez were carved into obelisks and stelae, written on scrolls made from parchment cured in frankincense smoke, and chanted in liturgy beneath star-washed skies. It was the language of kings, used in declarations of alliance and divine right, and it was the language of worship, used to translate sacred texts into a form the Aksumites believed God would hear. Among the most beautiful of these works was the Garima Gospels, an illuminated manuscript believed to be among the oldest surviving illustrated Christian texts in the world. Bound in humble leather, its pages bloom with vibrant reds, lapis blues, and golden halos. The ge'ez script dances alongside images of Christ, apostles, and angels, not frozen in medieval stillness, but alive with the warmth of devotion. Each ge'ez letter was not just a symbol, it was a portal, a breath, a vow, a gesture toward the eternal. The monks who wrote them did so not for praise, but for practice, a quiet act of spiritual alignment, of listening through the hand. Even in the margins of lesser scrolls, one finds prayers hidden in curls of script, poems without attribution, notes to future generations written not in haste, but in reverence. To write ge'ez was to kneel with ink, and though today it is no longer spoken in daily life, ge'ez remains the liturgical tongue of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. Each Sunday, its chants echo from mountain sanctuaries. Each sacred book, each relic, is guarded with words inked in its slow-burning fire. What Latin was to medieval Europe, ge'ez was, and is, to the Ethiopian soul. But perhaps it is even more. Not a dead language, but a dreaming one, a tongue that waits in silence until summoned by prayer or poem. It is also a language of continuity. Though Aksum as a political entity faded, GS carried its spirit into the future. Through centuries of upheaval, it endured, copied and recited by monks in remote preserved in secret groves, etched into crosses worn over generations. In times of persecution, it was whispered. In times of peace, it was sung. And today, even scholars who cannot speak it still feel its gravity. The way its syllables refuse haste, the way its calligraphy curves with the patience of centuries. There are modern efforts now to revive the teaching of GS, not to restore it as a living language in the street, but as a living presence in the spirit. Linguists, priests, and poets gather to preserve its mysteries, to teach its grammar like one might teach meditation, not just as knowledge, but as transformation. In every alphabet, there are stories, but in GS the alphabet is a story of an empire that did not seek eternity through war, but through word. Let us imagine now the scene. A lone monk in a high mountain cell, lit by a single beam of sun. Before him, a parchment scroll. Around him, silence broken only by wind and distant bells. And in his hand, the reed dipped in ink, tracing a word that has no beginning and no end. This is not just writing, it's his remembering, it's his communion. And as we close this chapter, dreamer, let us carry the echo of this language within us. For there are times, even in the modern world, when only an ancient tongue can speak what the heart truly knows. Now, as the sacred script fades into soft silence, let us walk the paths that surround it, to the monasteries in the clouds, where monks still live in timeless ritual, where the world above the world awaits. There are places in the world where the earth reaches toward the heavens and the heavens seem to bow in return, where the air is thin, the silence thick, and the soul begins to feel its wings. In the highlands of Ethiopia, scattered like stars fall into mountaintops, lie the ancient monasteries in the clouds, sanctuaries of solitude, guardians of mystery, and the living lungs of Aksum's eternal spirit. They are not easy to reach. Many are perched atop sheer cliffs, hidden on needle-like spires of stone or carved into the side of remotest. To reach them, one must climb winding footpaths hewn into rock, sometimes crawl through narrow crevices, or ascend hand-chiseled steps worn smooth by 1,000 barefoot pilgrims. And in some cases, there are no paths at all, only rope harnesses and blind trust, offered to the monks who lower woven baskets for the faithful, lifting both bodhis and prayers into the sky. These monasteries are not retreats of comfort. They are temples of surrender, far above the dust of the world, beyond the reach of empire or empire's fall. These places have endured for centuries, weathering storms, invasions, and the silence of history itself. One such monastery, Debradamo, rests atop a flat mountain plateau, accessible only by climbing a 40-foot cliff with the help of a rope made from woven leather. There are no stairs, no bridges, only the rope and the resolve of your heart. Those who live there, monks wrapped in soft cotton, their heads shaved, their eyes wise with stillness, live lives of quiet rhythm, prayer at dawn, scripture before bread, work in silence, sleep under stars that seem closer than clouds. Their homes are made of stone and mud, their walls painted with faded murals of saints, their libraries filled with manuscripts written by hand, many in GS wrapped in goatskin, their ink made from ash, their pages from patience. Time here does not flow, it pauses. The chants that rise from these sanctuaries are not for performance. They are echoes of the soul speaking back to its source. They are not meant to be heard by crowds, but by creation itself. Each monastery has its own guardian relic, perhaps a cross carved from olive wood, said to heal the sick, or a book copied by a saint's disciple, its words still pulsing with unseen warmth. Some monasteries keep bones of the righteous, others, stories passed down through whispered lineages, never written, only remembered, and while they seem removed from the world, they are not disconnected. These monks pray for the world. They fast not as denial, but as offering. They read the stars not as spectacle, but as scripture. The sky becomes their roof, the wind, their messenger. Each day lived upon these mountaintops is a testament to the Aksumite spirit that never died, a spirit of stillness, sacred duty, and enduring wonder. And pilgrims come. From the valleys below, they ascend with bowed heads and bare feet, carrying gifts not of gold, but of sorrow and hope. They ask not for miracles, but for clarity, for peace, for the veil to lift just slightly. Many leave with nothing tangible, yet they leave changed. Some say the mountains speak, others say the silence does. And then there are those who say that once, in the deep of night, they heard bells ringing from monasteries no longer marked on any map, as if the mountains themselves remembered prayers that had long since passed from mortal lips. In modern times, helicopters have tried to reach these sanctuaries. Cameras have attempted to document them, but something always eludes capture. The feeling, the hum, the sacred hush that cannot be filmed or framed. It is a presence. It is the memory of Aksum still alive in the breath of high places. Even now, in the 21st century, these monasteries continue to shape the Ethiopian Orthodox faith, quietly anchoring a tradition that stretches back through Frumentius, through Azana, through the ark and the language and the stone. They are living fossils of devotion, carved not from ambition, but from eternity. And so, dear dreamer, as we begin our descent from the clouds, we carry with us the lightness of altitude, not just of body, but of spirit. Ahead, another shadowed road awaits, not one paved in silence, but in forgone diplomacy, sacred coins, and hidden letters sent between distant kings. For Aksum was not only a spiritual realm, it was a kingdom with diplomatic breath, whispering across seas to Byzantium, Rome, and beyond. Let us now step into that quieter history, one written in metal and sealed in wax. In the hush between mountains and memory, we often forget that silence does not mean isolation. Beneath Aksum's contemplative veil, beneath its carved churches, monastic peaks, and sacred scrolls, there once pulsed a living rhythm of communication, a heartbeat of quiet diplomacy, soft as parchment, bright as coin. Aksum may be remembered as spiritual, but it was also sophisticated, cosmopolitan, and astute. It was an empire that did not shout its presence, but whispered across oceans. And those whispers reached far. One of its most radiant forms of contact with the outside world came in the shape of coins, small, round, yet remarkably loud in meaning. Long before much of sub-Saharan Africa minted coinage, Aksum produced its own. Gold, silver, and bronze coins began appearing in the 3rd century, bearing names of kings like Indabis, Azana, and Caleb. On one side, a royal profile crowned with a headcloth or diadem. On the other, symbols of belief, a crescent moon, a disk of the sun, and later, a cross. Once the kingdom embraced Christianity, each coin was not just currency, but declaration. It announced to the world, we are here, we are sovereign, we are sacred. These coins made their way across the seas, carried by merchants and diplomats, tucked into satchels of ivory, bundles of frankincense, or scrolls of silk. Aksumite currency has been discovered in India, Sri Lanka, Yemen, and southern Europe, not by accident, but by design. They were not relics. They were messengers. Each coin bore inscriptions in Ge'ez Greek, all both a subtle nod to Aksum's ability to straddle multiple worlds, to speak in tongues understood by distant courts. And then there were the letters. Few survive, but those that do are extraordinary. One comes from a Byzantine historian, noting that King Caleb of Aksum communicated directly with Justinian, emperor of the Eastern Roman Empire. They corresponded not as strangers, but as equals, discussing matters of trade, faith, and even joint intervention in the Arabian Peninsula, where Caleb had launched an expedition to protect persecuted Christians. Imagine this: a scroll carried across the Red Sea on a merchant vessel, inked in royal script, sealed with the insignia of the Lion of Judah, a message from a king in the Ethiopian highlands to the court of Constantinople. Worlds apart, yet aligned by common cause, Caleb's involvement in Himyar in present-day Yemen was no minor affair. It was a bold act of transoceanic influence. After learning of the suffering of Christians under a Himyarite ruler, Caleb is said to have sent an army across the Red Sea. It was not a war of conquest. It was a crusade of compassion. Centuries before the word would be coined, Byzantine sources praised him. Coins minted in his name spread further. His name entered the annals of foreign historians, including the Syriac and Arabic traditions. Aksum, without ever raising a flag over faraway lands, became a moral superpower, its actions guided not by greed but by justice cloaked in sovereignty. But diplomacy was not always made of parchment and gold. It also lived in architecture, with foreign elements subtly woven into Aksumite design. In the city of Agilis, Aksum's Red Sea port, archaeologists have unearthed inscriptions in Greek, Roman-style columns, and fragments of amphorae once filled with Mediterranean wine. These were not trophies of conquest but tokens of connection, proof that Aksum stood at a point of convergence, where east met west, north met south. Agilis was more than a port. It was a window, a space where sailors could look up at while hearing the distant chants of monks and the rustle of incense being packed for distant altars. But as the centuries turned, the flow of gold slowed. The Red Sea trade routes shifted. Islam emerged as a rising spiritual and commercial force, and the sands began to gather over Agilis, sealing the whispers in salt and wind. Yet Aksum did not vanish. It withdrew. It turned inward, as wise empires often do, not in defeat, but in preservation. The coins remained, buried beneath soil, waiting. The letters, archived in monasteries, dreaming. The memory of kings like Caleb, preserved in liturgies, stone carvings, and oral blessings passed from elder to child. Today, historians look back and marvel that an empire once so spiritually rich could also be diplomatically elegant, maintaining connections without conquest, sending messages not through armies, but through intention. There is something profoundly modern in Aksum's ancient ways, a model of sacred state, of exchange without domination, of sovereignty without arrogance. As we close this chapter, dreamer, let the soft weight of a coin rest in your palm. Feel the pressure of old gold, the echo of ancient agreements, the pulse of a world not lost, only sleeping. Now, our path leads not to court or port, but to the hidden libraries of the desert, where the last fragments of this empire, scrolls and symbols, are held by monks who have never forgotten. The next gate is silence again. The next guide, memory bound in manuscript. There are stories too fragile to be spoken, too sacred to be carved in stone. They live instead in quiet corners, in bound leaves of parchment, in scrolls that hum with dust and devotion. In the arid highlands and remote sanctuaries of Ethiopia, the final whispers of Aksum survive, not in monuments, but in forgotten archives, waiting in the dark. Here the wind shifts across crumbling chapels and monastic libraries built into the cliffs. Wooden shelves sag with the weight of centuries, and there, wrapped in cloth, nestled in carved niches, lie the scrolls of Aksum, relics of faith, astronomy, medicine, mysticism, and empire. These are not grand libraries of marble and vaults, but hidden sanctuaries, rooms the size of a shepherd's hut, candlelit chambers that smell of wax, leather, and memory. And yet, within these humble walls rests a treasury of the human spirit, records of a civilization that refused to vanish. Each manuscript is handwritten, its ink made from ash or crushed bark, its pages crafted from animal skin prepared over weeks. Some are bound between covers of cured wood, others rolled tightly and wrapped in protective linen. A few are too delicate to unroll. They breathe their stories through the reverence of those who guard them. The scribes who created these works were not merely they were keepers of the unseen. Each letter they inked was part of a sacred rhythm, a meditation in script. Writing was worship. Mistakes were rare, for each page was a prayer. And what do these ancient scrolls hold? The miracles of Mary, rendered in poetic the Book of Enoch, preserved here long after it vanished from the West. Medical texts blending herbs and heavenly intervention. Star charts scrolled with geometric patterns, hinting at Aksum's lost cosmology. Royal chronicles, hymns to the angels, instructions for sacred rites, and, most hauntingly, the names of kings long erased from stone but remembered in ink. Some scrolls are purely symbolic, made not for reading, but for protection. Called kitab, these magical texts were worn by pilgrims or kept in homes, believed to guard against misfortune. Inside, one might find diagrams of sacred geometry, incantations invoking the archangels, or obscure references to star-born messengers. Others are more scholarly copies of the Kebra Nagas, genealogies and treatises on theology passed between generations of monks. Most have never been fully translated. They remain waiting. A few Western explorers in the 19th and 20th centuries stumbled upon these archives. Some were welcomed by monastic communities and allowed brief glimpses. Others were turned away, the monks refusing to let the sacred be handled without devotion. And rightly so. These manuscripts are not mere artifacts. They are living memories. Even today, teams of Ethiopian scholars and international conservators work side by side, painstakingly cataloging and preserving these scrolls, not in glass museums, but often in the very places they were born. Mountain churches, cliffside libraries, valley chapels hidden from roads. There is still so much unknown. Some scrolls mention temples never discovered. Others refer to lineages that challenge established chronologies. There are names scratched in margins. Women, warriors, poets, whose lives lie just beyond reach. Each sentence may contain an entire lost world. What makes these archives even more mysterious is how fragmented they are. Unlike centralized imperial libraries, Aksum's knowledge was distributed, tucked into monasteries, entrusted to individual monks, passed down orally alongside ink. When the empire faded, its memory splintered into 1,000 lanterns, scattered across the mountains. This scattering preserved it. No single conqueror could destroy Aksum's wisdom. To erase it, one would have to silence every whisper, every prayer, every night chant that echoed across Ethiopia's high places. And whispers cannot be caught. There are tales of scrolls buried in desert jars, guarded by codes only the initiated know, of manuscripts hidden inside altars, of libraries protected by oral guardians who have never touched the page, but know every word by heart. And there are scrolls still being written. In remote corners, new scribes continue the ancient tradition. They ink not new knowledge, but echoes, retelling the old stories in forms both preserved and transformed. Their script is still Giez, their language, still silence made visible. In a world that forgets so quickly, these scrolls remember slowly. They do not beg to be read. They ask to be listened to. And so, dreamer, as we close this hidden door and brush the dust from our hands, we carry more than knowledge. We carry the blessing of the remembered. Now, step with reverence into the next chamber, one not of parchment, but of ritual. For Aksum was not merely a place of memory. It was a land of sacred action, of festivals that mirrored celestial movements, of processions that echoed ancient myths, of communal acts that kept history alive in the body. Let us now walk the winding paths of ritual time, where the sacred became not just known but enacted. In the kingdom of Aksum, time was not a line, but a circle, not a march forward but a spiral that returned again and again to the sacred. Each day was a point along a celestial rhythm, each season a note in a greater harmony. And so, time in Aksum was not only counted, it was lived, sung, danced, and offered like incense into the sky. From solstice to solstice, from moonrise to eclipse, the Aksumite year unfolded as a tapestry of festivals, each woven with ritual, chant, and memory. These were not holidays in the modern sense. They were portals, where the divine stepped through the veil and touched the lives of the people. And the people responded. They responded with light and shadow, with silence and sound, with barefoot processions and rivers of chant. Even now, in the highlands of Ethiopia, many of these rituals endure, some rooted in Christianity, others holding older roots, quietly growing beneath new names, but all trace their lineage to the rhythm of Aksum, to the empire that aligned its soul with the cosmos. One of the most sacred celebrations is Timkat, the Feast of the Epiphany, marking the baptism of Christ in the Jordan. But in Ethiopia, it is more than remembrance. It is re-experiencing. At dawn, a procession begins. Priests dressed in brilliant embroidered robes carry tablets, sacred replicas of the Ark of the Covenant, wrapped in layers of cloth and mystery. These are not symbols. They are believed to carry the essence of the divine. Drums beat, sistrums jingle. The faithful gather in thousands, wearing white, singing hymns in ancient G. The air is thick with the scent of frankincense and dew. The tablets are carried toward water, rivers, springs, sacred pools, and there, in the hush of early light, they rest. As dawn breaks, the clergy bless the water, invoking its ancient power of cleansing and rebirth. Then, the people bathe, not only their bodies, but their memories. It is said the water wakens not just the flesh, but the soul's forgotten story. And all around, the hills echo with chant, with ululations of joy, with silence that feels holy. Another sacred festival is the Feast of the Finding of the True Cross. Its celebration is elemental. Fire, shadow, memory. Great bonfires called Demera are built in the heart of villages and cities. These fires recall the vision of Queen Helena, mother of Constantine, who, according to legend, found the cross of Christ through divine guidance and the lighting of a flame. But in Ethiopia, Meskel also carries older echoes of light returning after the rains of fires, both destruction and renewal, of the balance between dusk and dawn. As the flames rise, crosses are formed from flowering branches and lifted high. Children sing, elders weep, and above it all, the smoke climbs into the night, carrying prayers. And then there is Fosika, Ethiopian Easter, perhaps the most deeply contemplative of all. The faithful fast for 55 days, abstaining not only from food, but from indulgence of all kinds. It is a return to silence, to simplicity, a walking into the desert of the soul. At midnight on Fosika, churches are filled with candlelight. The liturgy lasts through the dark hours, and when dawn comes, it is not just light that returns, it is life, renewed. But even older than these Christian rites are the seasonal rituals tied to the Aksumite calendar, a unique blend of solar and lunar rhythms. The New Year in Kudatash is celebrated in September, as the rains fade and the golden mescal flowers bloom across the fields. It is a time of gifts, of gratitude, and of new beginnings. In ancient times, it marked not just the start of a calendar, but the resetting of sacred intention, a moment to look both forward and inward. The Aksemites did not separate the sacred from the natural. The movement of cattle, the ripening of grain, the rising of Sirius, all were part of their liturgical calendar. Every action, from harvesting to mourning, was folded into sacred time. And so, the empire moved not just through history, but through ritual, a choreography of devotion. Even funerals were not endings, they were passages. Bodies wrapped in cloth were anointed with scented oils. Psalms were chanted beneath stars. The deceased was not mourned, but accompanied into the next realm. In some traditions, bells were rung to guide the spirit, candles lit to show it the way, and in the silence that followed, the community would gather, not to despair, but to remember. For an Aksum memory was an act of worship, and ritual was how the people wove heaven into earth. Today, these festivals continue, not identical to their ancient form, but still alive with the same pulse, still filled with drums that echo like heartbeats, still steeped in mist and incense, still shaped by the sacred geometry of time. To witness them is to feel the ancient empire breathing, not in stone, not in empire, but in rhythm. And so, dear dreamer, as the last candle flickers low and the chant fades into morning, let us follow the rhythm deeper still, to the mysteries of the Queen of Sheba herself, and the legacy she left etched into the soul of Aksum. For where myth and memory meet, there she waits, veiled in gold, wrapped in wisdom, and crowned with longing. In the soft folds of legend, where history sleeps beside dream, there walks a queen whose shadow has never left the mountains of Aksum. Her name echoes through stone and scripture like the Queen of Sheba. Though her footsteps have long faded, her presence lingers like incense in the morning air. Mysterious, majestic, and forever entwined with the soul of an empire. Sheba is a name whispered across cultures, Ethiopian, Arabian, Hebrew, and beyond. But in the heart of Aksum, she is not merely a character in another people's story. She is mother, sovereign, and her journey to Jerusalem to meet the great King Solomon is not told as fable, but as origin, the sacred beginning of Aksum's divine thread. The tale is preserved most vividly in the Kibra Nagast, that holy book of kingship and light. It tells us that Makeda ruled a land of wisdom and wealth, that her court was adorned with golden vessels, perfumed with frankincense, and guided by sages who read the stars like scripture. But she sought something more. Not gold, not alliances, but truth. And so, she journeyed north, through deserts and danger, across incense roads and moonlit plateaus. Makeda traveled with a caravan set to stretch 4 miles. Some say lions walked beside her chariot. Others say the stars themselves rearranged to mark her path. But all agree her arrival in Jerusalem was like the rising of a second sun. Solomon, wise beyond measure, recognized in her a mirror of his own spirit. Not a rival, but an equal. Their dialogue, according to tradition, was one of minds and mysteries. She posed questions none had dared ask. He answered with riddles of time and breath. Between them, a sacred resonance formed, of spirit speaking to spirit. From this meeting, a son was born, Menelik, the Lion of Judah. When he came of age, he journeyed to Jerusalem to meet his father. And when he returned to Ethiopia, he did not come alone. He brought with him, it is said, the Ark of the Covenant. Thus was Aksum crowned with the divine, not by conquest, but by inheritance, not by chance, but by And at the center of it all was Makeda, not just a queen, but a bridge between worlds. But who was she, truly? Archaeologists search for her in ruins. Some believe she ruled from Aksum itself. Others say her throne sat amid the incense groves of the Tigray highlands. There are ancient terraces still called Queen Sheba's palace, their stone steps worn with age. There are pillars in Sabaean script, cisterns believed to have held her sacred water, pools named for her mirror, echoes upon echoes. Some argue her story is myth, others claim it is history, but in Aksum, it is both. Makeda is more than a figure. She is a presence. She is invoked in prayer, chanted in Jia, depicted in icons, her eyes filled with wisdom and longing. Her name is sung during Timkut, and her image graces manuscripts passed from monk to monk. She is lioness and lightbearer, queen and seeker, and there is something deeper still, something few speak aloud. It is said that Makeda never returned to her palace in the same way, that after meeting Solomon, after tasting the honey of revelation, she walked through her kingdom differently, not as one above, but as one within. She had seen not only a king, but a mirror. She had heard the voice of wisdom not as command, but as communion. And that is what she passed to her people. Not lineage, but legacy. A calling to be more than a nation, to be a sacred people. Through her, Aksum did not merely claim royalty, it claimed meaning. It is no accident that the Solomonic dynasty, which ruled Ethiopia in various forms until the 20th century, traced its authority back to her. That emperors bore the title elect of God, descendant of Solomon and Shiva, that even Emperor Haile Selassie, revered as divine in the Rastafarian faith, stood as the latest echo of her blood. But beyond the crown, beyond the ark, beyond the scrolls and songs, Makeda remains a symbol of something more enduring, the eternal quest for truth. She reminds us that sovereignty is not power, but pursuit, that greatness is not inherited, but chosen, in humility, in wonder, in journey. And so, dear dreamer, as we leave the Queen's shadow, we do not leave her behind. For in every step forward into Aksum's mysteries, her story follows. Soft-footed, gold-veiled, eternal. Now, let us walk onward to the final days of the empire, where the light did not go out, but deepened into twilight, where kings faded into monks, and mountains became vaults for the last embers of a forgotten flame. Every empire breathes. It is born with the rising sun, it grows with the turn of seasons, and one day, but not all endings are defeat. Some are descent, a return, a folding inward like the petals of a sacred flower at dusk. Such was the twilight of Aksum. As the centuries passed, the steady hum of the Aksumite empire began to dim. The sea roots that once sang with the trade of gold, ivory and incense shifted with the rise of new powers. The blossoming of Islamic caliphates across the Arabian Peninsula reshaped the currents of commerce. Agilis, the glittering port that had once been Aksum's open hand to the world, fell silent beneath the sigh of encroaching sands. Yet it was not conquest that felled Aksum. It was the soft turning of time. Where other empires collapse in fire, Aksum chose withdrawal. Its rulers, sensing the winds of change, turned their gaze inward, from ocean to highland, from expansion to preservation. The capital, once echoing with chants and trade, began to fade into the folds of legend, and in its place, a quieter kingdom emerged, one of monks, hidden churches, and prayer as politics. Some historians speak of a decline, but perhaps it is better understood as a transfiguration. It ascended into the mountains. Villages once touched by the crown now answered to abbots and mystics. Royal lines flowed not only through palaces but through monastic lineages, where the blood of Solomon and Sheba mingled with the silence of the desert. Sacred texts were copied, crosses were carved from stone, and memory was no longer displayed, it was guarded. The light of Aksum did not go out. It was hidden, like fire buried in embers. There are echoes of this transformation across the highlands. In the Tigray region, raccoon churches were carved into sheer cliffs, not in grandeur but in humility. Many date from the post-Aksumite era, bearing names and iconography that whisper of continuity rather than replacement. These sanctuaries became refuges of tradition, carrying the spiritual architecture of Aksum forward even as its political form dissolved. The language survived, too. G is no longer spoken, remained sung, becoming the eternal tongue of prayer. The calendar, deeply rooted in Aksumite cosmology, continued to mark the passing of sacred time, and the rituals, once held in imperial halls, now lived in candlelit cells and forest clearings. Even the memory of kings was not erased. They became saints. Take, for example, Caleb, the warrior emperor who protected Christians in Arabia. After his reign, tradition holds that he abdicated the throne and retreated to monastic life, choosing silence over rule, prayer over glory. His tomb, said to lie near Aksum, became a pilgrimage site, not for empire's sake, but for devotion. The twilight of Aksum was not the end of Ethiopia's greatness. It was the seed of a spiritual flowering. From this hidden root would later rise the Zagu dynasty, the builders of Lalibela stone churches, and then the Solomonic revival, stretching through the centuries to the modern era. Through it all, Aksum remained the origin point, the still eye of a whirling spiral, the dream that fed the living. Even today, the name Aksum stirs something ancient in the Ethiopian heart. It is not just a city of ruins. It is a city of presence. Pilgrims walk its streets in silence. White-robed monks vanish into its shadows. The great obelisks still stand like sentinels of time, casting long shadows across stone paths worn by centuries of footsteps. And in the chapel behind St. Mary's Church, where the ark is said to rest, a lone guardian still keeps vigil. He does not speak, he does not leave. His presence reminds us. Some mysteries are not meant to be solved, only witnessed. The twilight of Aksum is not a lament. It is a lesson. That greatness need not roar to be eternal. That power, when rooted in humility, becomes legacy. And at the end of one story is often the opening chapter of another, whispered softly through the corridors of time. So as the stars rise once more above the northern highlands, and the wind moves gently through the olive trees, we bow to the quiet endurance of Aksum, the empire that became a memory, and the memory that became a soul. Now, let us begin the final leg of our journey, into the modern echoes, where artists, dreamers, and mystics still feel the pull of Aksum's unseen hand, where its story is no longer written in stone, but in the dreams of those who listen. Not all ruins sleep. Some breathe, some whisper through the generations, carried in the marrow of descendants, echoed in the rhythm of ritual, language, and song. The empire of Aksum, though veiled in twilight, did not vanish into silence. Its pulse continues, in bloodlines, in churches, in the soul of modern Ethiopia, where memory walks beside the living. Even today, to say the name Aksum in the northern highlands is to summon a presence. It is not simply a city. It is a sacred terrain, a point of orientation for identity, ancestry, and spiritual truth. Wander through the streets of modern Aksum, and you will find schoolchildren walking past ancient stelae. Women in flowing white shawls gather at the base of thousand-year-old obelisks, whispering prayers as if the stone still listens. Young boys help priests prepare incense in churches whose foundations stretch back to King Azana's reign. Here, time is not a line. It is a spiral. In the heart of the city stands the Church of St. Mary of Zion, rebuilt in many layers through the centuries, each a palimpsest of devotion. Behind it lies the Chapel of the Tablet, that humble, mysterious structure said to house the Ark of the Covenant. Only one man may enter, the guardian monk, chosen for life. He is not a symbol, he is legacy made flesh. Tourists may stand behind the stone wall. Scholars may question, but for the faithful, the Ark is not a metaphor. It is real, alive, in mystery, beating like a second heart beneath the stones. Elsewhere in the region, artists paint icons in the Aksumite style. Bold eyes, sacred geometry, golden halos that catch the sun like ancient crowns. Musicians sing liturgies in Ge'ez, their voices echoing across valleys where the bones of kings lie dreaming. Architects designed new churches using ancient proportions, blending past and present in sacred rhythm. Even the calendar remains distinct. The Ethiopian calendar, with its 13 months and different new year, descends directly from Aksumite. The people of the highlands mark seasons not only by rain and harvest, but by feast days, some of which reach back to the empire's earliest light. And the story of Sheba and Solomon is not forgotten. It is retold at weddings, in schools. During liturgy, children memorize the names of Makeda and Mentalik as if they were relatives, and in many homes, you will find portraits of Haile, last emperor of the Solomonic line, hanging beside images of Christ and the Virgin. He, too, traced his lineage back to Aksum, to the Lion of Judah, born of a queen and a king whose union bound heaven to earth. The Rastafarian movement, which emerged far from Africa's shores, recognizes Haile Selassie as divine, their messiah, their Jah. In reggae, rhythms, and dreadlock devotion, the name of Aksum travels still, not as myth, but as living revelation. In literature, to Aksum reawakens. Poets weave its symbols into modern verse. Novelists explore its mysteries through historical fiction and spiritual allegory. Historians revisit its legacy with renewed wonder, questioning old narratives that once dismissed it as peripheral. Because Aksum was never peripheral. It was central, a spiritual compass, a hidden star. And now, as Africa reclaims its own histories, Aksum stands again. Not in military might or territorial expansion, but in its vision. A model of a sacred empire, one that sought harmony with creation, that valued wisdom over wealth, that carved its legacy not into empire, but into eternity. There are efforts today to preserve what remains, restoration projects for churches, digitization of manuscripts, pilgrimages revived, cultural festivals organized not for tourism, but for reverence. In the highlands, young monks still study by candlelight, learning Jia's syllable by syllable. Children sing psalms their ancestors once sang, and elders speak of dreams in which saints return to remind them, you come from kings, you come from covenant, and in those dreams, sometimes, there's a queen, veiled in gold, her eyes wise and filled with sky. She says, do not forget who you are. And so they do not, the people of Aksum and all who carry its inheritance. Remember, now, as our journey begins to draw to a close, we step not into an ending, but into an opening, a stillness where the veil thins, where the empire speaks, not through obelisks or thrones, but through the soft inner voice that calls us to deeper truths. Let us now enter that final space, the one between history and dream, where all that has been lingers gently, waiting for those who still walk with wonder. They rise from the earth like frozen prayers, tall, slender, unblinking. The obelisks of Aksum, some toppled, some standing proud against wind and sky, are more than stone. They are voices, long silenced, but never stilled. And if you listen, truly listen, you can almost hear them breathing. Each line carved upon their surface hums with meaning. Each shadow they cast remembers. These monolithic stelae are among the greatest enigmas of ancient engineering. Hewn from single blocks of granite, some weighing hundreds of tons, they were transported from distant quarries, raised without cranes, and aligned with such precision that modern scholars remain awestruck. They were not built for spectacle. They were built for sacred memory. The tallest surviving obelisk, once over 20 meters high, bears the delicate carvings of what appears to be an Aksumite tower. Stacked windows, a symbolic edifice etched in relief. It is a representation of a house, not for the living, but for the dead. A monument marking the tomb of a king, a pathway for the soul to rise through. This is how Aksum spoke to eternity, not through boasting inscriptions, not through scenes of war, but through the quiet grammar of form, symmetry, and vertical ascent. These obelisks do not shout. They call to the stars, to the ancestors, to the hidden places in the soul that still remember what it means to walk with reverence upon the earth. And they still stand, though many were toppled, by age, by tremor, by foreign hands. Some endure leaning but unbroken. Others lie where they fell, great serpents of stone asleep in the grass. Even in ruin, they are beautiful. Even in silence they speak. Some say the stelae align with celestial movements, solstices, equinoxes, the rising of certain stars. Others believe their placement mimics constellations above. Whether or not this is provable, one truth remains. They feel cosmic, they feel intentional. When you walk among them, as pilgrims still do, time unravels. You forget where the beginning ends, and the ending begins. You move among the stones as one might move through the pages of a living book. And if you stay until dusk, when the last light of the sun kisses the granite, you might feel the hush deepen. You might hear the wind shift. You might sense, in your bones, that you are being watched. Not by something menacing, but by something eternal. The obelisks do not tell you what to believe. They invite you to remember what it meant to live in a world where death was not an end, but a threshold, where the soul ascended with stone beneath it and sky above, where kings were buried not in pyramids of conquest, but in vertical symbols of aspiration. And still they whisper. They whisper of the sacred geometry that once guided hands and hearts, of rituals performed in the shadow of their stone, of chants carried on wind from tomb to temple, of the ark once said to rest nearby, of queens who dreamed in gold, of languages sung before they were written. They whisper of you, of the dreamer wandering now through memory, seeking stillness in history's quiet corridors. Because the obelisks are not simply monuments to the past, they are mirrors, reflecting the timeless longing in all of us to rise, to remember, to belong to something greater than this fleeting breath. And so, as we step slowly away from these ancient towers, let us not say farewell. Let us say thank you. Thank you to the stone that never stopped listening. Thank you to the sky that watched the whole time. Thank you to the silence that kept the memory alive. But our journey is not quite ended. We must now enter the final chapters, where stone becomes story, and story becomes dream. Let us now gather all we've seen, felt, and remembered, and step into the hush of the eternal. There are some places that never truly vanish. They linger, not in the maps we draw, but in the dreams we keep. Aksum is one such place. An empire, yes. A civilization, of course. But more than that, Aksum is a dream cast in shadow and sun, a dream shaped by stone, by silence, by the weight of memory resting on the shoulders of prayer. It does not live in one location. It lives between the stars and the soil, between the chant and the breath, between the waking mind and the remembering soul. To dream of Aksum is to walk into a time where kings were crowned by light, not lineage, where a queen journeyed not for conquest, but for wisdom, where gold was not hoarded, but consecrated, where trade routes stretched like veins across the ancient world, but always returned to a single heart, beating beneath the Ethiopian highlands. It is to imagine a place where the ark is not legend, but presence, where its guardians walk unseen, their lives surrendered to devotion, where bells ring out not to gather crowds, but to part the veil between worlds. To dream of Aksum is to feel time spiral around you, each moment laid upon the last, ancient liturgies still echoing in stone churches, monks tracing holy words with hands weathered by centuries, pilgrims pressing their foreheads against relics older than memory. It is to hear the wind whisper in Gies, calling forth voices that once sang beneath obelisks, voices that never stopped singing, only grew quieter, more inward, more sacred. Aksum is not gone. It has become subtle, like incense. It rises, seen only when light bends through shadow, like a sacred melody heard not with the ears, but with the hearts listening. It appears in unexpected places, in the pause between verses sung by a priest at dawn, in the shimmer of oil on a manuscript's page, in the quiet dignity of a grandmother passing down the story of the Queen of Sheba, in the eyes of a child walking barefoot across the ruins, his steps guided by the ghosts of kings. And beyond Ethiopia, too, the dream drifts, in the minds of those who study ancient scripts, puzzled by their in the longing of those who seek spiritual origin, tracing lineages back to stars and scrolls, in the stillness before sleep, when history softens and the past walks close, because Aksum was never meant to dominate. It was meant to remind us that power need not conquer to endure, that beauty lies in balance, that memory, when carried with reverence, becomes a living flame, that the divine may descend not with thunder, but with stillness, resting in a stone tabernacle, guarded by silence. And so, dreamer, as you rest here in this breath between chapters, feel Aksum not as a story you've heard, but as a place within you, a sacred chamber carved in your own soul, waiting to be visited again and again, whenever the noise of the world grows too loud, whenever your spirit longs to walk barefoot through time, because the empire of Aksum is not just a memory, it is a prayer, a pattern, a promise, and a dream still dreaming. Now, as the final winds pass through the trees of the highlands, and the stars gather overhead like witnesses, we prepare to descend gently into the last echoes, to lay down beside the mystery and let it guide us into rest. When an empire falls, there is often noise, the clatter of conquest, the rumble of change, the voices of the newly risen calling over the ashes of the past. But when Aksum faded, it left behind no fury, it left silence, a deep, contemplative silence, one that still hangs in the air of the northern highlands, one that curls beneath the eaves of crumbling chapels, that rests inside the grooves of carved crosses worn smooth by centuries of touch, a silence that is not absence, but presence, because Aksum did not fall. It withdrew. It stepped back into the mist from which it had first emerged, like a vision sent by the divine for a time, and then returned to the veil, so that its truth might be kept sacred. This silence is what remains, and it holds everything. It holds the pulse of a forgotten port, where once ships bound for India docked with silks and cinnamon. It holds the echo of coins struck in gold, bearing crosses and crowns, once exchanged in bustling markets. It holds the footfall of Queen Makeda's caravan beneath, the soft shuffle of monks carrying scrolls wrapped in linen, The long, slow breath of a guardian in a chapel no one enters. In the face of this silence, many have tried to fill the void with speculation. Where did Aksum go? Why did it retreat? What more could it have become? But the true keepers of the silence do not ask such questions. They listen, for within this hush lies more than explanation. It holds revelation. It tells us that not all greatness seeks to be seen, that not every monument must be carved in ambition, that sometimes the most profound legacy is the one that hides itself, trusting that those who seek with sincerity will find, not in conquest but in contemplation. It is a silence that invites return, a silence that welcomes presence. It hums beneath the chants sung in Gies by candlelight. It flows through the ink of manuscripts copied by trembling hands in mountain monasteries. It travels in the shadow of processions, in the smoke of burning myrrh, in the hush that falls when the ark passes by unseen. And it lingers even now, here in the still space where you have followed the path of Aksum with reverence and wonder. This silence is not the end. It is the threshold, the moment when the story is no longer being told to you, but begins to live within you. Perhaps now you will carry it forward, in a dream, in a prayer, in a glance at the stars overhead that once guided ancient kings and queens. Perhaps you, too, will become a keeper of this silence. Let it soften your pace. Let it deepen your breath. Let it hold your thoughts in this gentle palm. Because in a world that hurries to forget, Aksum teaches us to remember slowly. Now, let us step gently into the final chapter. Not a conclusion, but a benediction. A blessing for the soul of the empire, for those who remember it, and for all who drift into sleep guided by its light. Sleep now, dear empire. Sleep beneath your blanket of stone and sky, where the mountain winds sing your lullabies, and the stars keep gentle watch. You have carried your people through centuries of silence and spirit, through rhythm and reverence, through exile and return. And now, we come only to bless, not to awaken. Sleep, Aksum, with your obelisks, rising still like dream stalks toward heaven, with your scrolls tucked into mountain walls like quiet hearts still beating, with your ark hidden behind veils of devotion, guarded not by soldiers, but by stillness. You are not gone. You are held, not broken, simply folded into the deeper layers of memory, where only the listening soul may follow. Blessed be your soil, rich with the footsteps of kings and pilgrims, of queens who sought truth more than glory. Blessed be your waters, which baptize not only bodies, but histories. Blessed be your sky wide and waiting, the dome of your silent temple. To the priests who chanted through plagues and invasions, to the monks who copied the holy names by candlelight when kingdoms crumbled, to the children who still speak your lineage in lullabies, to them we give thanks. May your language never be lost, even if only sung. May your sacred geometry remain in the hands of those who build with love. May your dream outlast all forgetting. And to you, dreamer who has walked beside us through these corridors of ancient breath, too, are now a bearer of Aksum's light. You have touched stone with spirit. You have felt the weight of silence, not as emptiness, but as offering. You have heard the whisper beneath history's noise. Carry it gently. Let it settle in your thoughts as you sleep, like incense rising to unseen altars. Let the memory of gold coins and sacred scrolls flicker in your dreams. Let the voice of Mikado call softly across the sands of time, not demanding, but reminding. You are descended from something eternal. You are walking a path once walked by kings, and so, may the blessings of Aksum guide your rest. May your night be filled with stillness, your dreams with mystery, your soul with peace. Sleep now, beneath the veil of stars. The dreaming historian watches over you. The stones remember. The silence holds you. Good night, dreamer. And may the ancient light of Aksum guide you home.